The four latest releases from Hammer have four very distinctive shapes. You've practically got an entire tournament arsenal right at your fingertips. Welcome back to the channel, my name is Brian, and today we're talking about the four latest releases in the Hammer lineup for the fall and winter season. They are the Envy, the Scorpion Sting, the 3D Offset Attack, and the Purple Hammer Reactive. We have a lot to cover, so don't be afraid to jump around, find what you need. The chapters are listed. They're called chapters on YouTube, but the timestamps, they're in the description, and if you're on your desktop site, they're right beside the video on YouTube. So make sure you check those out, find what you're looking for. But we're going to jump right into it talking about the Envy. The Envy is Hammer's strongest asymmetrical ball ever released. It has an 0.21 intermediate differential, and I was going back through and seeing if any Hammer cores had that strong of an intermediate differential, and I think the answer is no. Most recently we had Obsession, that was only a 13 intermediate differential. The Redemption was a 15, and you go back to things like the Statement, and a couple balls before that were in the 14 and 15 range. So nothing touched this 21 intermediate differential that's on this Envy. Now remember, intermediate differential is responsible for the change of direction or the sharpness of the breakpoint once the ball encounters friction. So this is going to be a good change of direction for such a aggressively sanded, strong ball, which tends to make them earlier and smoother. Now let's talk a little bit more about this core because it's a really unique shape and it has a lot of technology built into it. It's got a flip cap on top, that's high density, and it's got a radial puck at the bottom, that's also high density. The radial puck at the bottom is unique to Dot. What we did here was we kept it on the same axis as, like, you know, the Widows have the pucks on top, the Webs have the pucks on top, but when you put it on the bottom on a Dot ball, that means that you are not drilling into it with the fingers, which means it's maintaining its integrity and its intent, which is to add density, which is to add differential. So you're maintaining that differential after drilling. So that's a really cool technology. Both of these are centered away from the center of the core to try to create some instability so that you've got some good change of direction at the back of the lane, and we've accomplished that really well between the intermediate differential and the placement of the different densities in this core. And then of course you see the wings on the side. They're both in the horizontal and the vertical plane, and those are creating the asymmetry, and very specifically on the planes that they're built on. So, you know, a little different way about building asymmetry into a core, but all of it to accomplish the same thing, and that's to make this ball change direction. Of course, this one has carbon fiber built into the outer core for harder hitting power because it's a slightly more rigid material with carbon fiber in the matrix of that material. And it's got the Envy solid cover stock. Now that's an easy one to remember because the ball's named Envy. This cover stock was actually previously used. It had the carbon fiber infused Envy cover stock on the Obsession original Big Obsession, the 050 differential Obsession, not the Tour, and it was also again on the Infamous. And this core, actually, going back to that, core actually borrows a lot of inspiration from the Infamous in terms of design, with the radial puck on the bottom, the flip cap on top. That Infamous was a little sensitive to player matchups, depending on the environment you were bowling on. For some players, it dug in really early because of the aggressive cover stock. For some players, it got down the lane almost too well and recovered a little too late. If you played with the surface, you could get it to match up really well. It was just a little sensitive with high RG of 256. It was just a little sensitive to where it read the lane and picked up and went. This one, I guarantee, is a lot less sensitive, both because it has so much intermediate built into it to help it change direction, but also because it's a much more medium RG at 2505. So with a higher differential, a more medium RG, and more intermediate differential, this ball's built to change directions, and it should match a lot of player styles a lot better, I think. Moving over now to the very beautiful Scorpion Sting. This one is an excellent, clean, and arcing mid-range ball, and you get a lot of performance for the price out of this one. I've seen web review videos where they pit this one against higher performance products from other brands, and it really does hold its own. This has a brand new core in it. It's the LED 3.0. Of course, the LED is in the original Purple Hammer. The 2.0 is a heavily modified version that just took some design inspiration from the Purple Hammer, and that one's in the original Scorpion. And now this one is modified again. It is a higher volume core, but it's shorter and fatter, and that's because there's a flip block on top. This is going to give us more differential, but of course you can't just put that flip block in and go to town with the original core design, because then the differential would be through the roof. So this core design was rescaled to be shorter and wider to accommodate a much more medium differential. Of course, now we're still up a tick from the original Scorpion at 0.45. We wanted to make sure that this ball got around the corner the way we wanted to see it back end. And that LED 2.0 core was just a little too mid-laney with a little too slow of a response to friction at the back of the lane. So this pearl cover stock is really complemented by this core, which is particularly designed for the price point that it's sitting at. Of course, this one has carbon-infused outer core for harder hitting power, and it's going to be surrounded by the Semtex pearl cover stock. Now, this one was on some higher price point balls back in the day, but most recently the hybrid version was on the Scorpion. This is the first time we've seen the pearl Semtex cover since the EBI days. So a nice little return, and it's just a solid performer. The 3D offset attack. This is an absolute watch this moment from the Chem team, and we'll talk about the new HK cover in a minute. But first I just want to review the core. You kind of already know this is the original offset core, that offset going toward the mass bias, which means that you're actually hitting a little more core material when you drill into it. That makes sure that the diff and intermediate diff are up a little bit for thumb-in players. And of course, the core is pretty medium to high flaring at 0.53. It's definitely on the high side of medium, and it's a fairly even arcing core by nature. But this cover stock really brings it to life, and it makes it a much harder charging ball than the original, I guess the re-release of the 3D offset high rev that we did about a year ago. This one has 0.08 intermediate differential built into it, which is going to be a nice bridge ball. It's not going to be as early and hook steady as some of those high performance ASIMs can be, and it's not going to be as round and slow as some of the symmetricals can be. So it's going to be right in between those two. It's going to be the best of both worlds, and this is an absolute house shot killer. And of course, it's going to be very versatile on a wide range of patterns, because this one sits in the medium range in terms of the hook potential of the hammer balls, although this is a sharp ball with this new cover on it. Of course, it's got carbon fiber infused outer core material for harder hitting power. It's got dot technology, which means that you can put any layout you want on this ball without drilling through the pin and voiding the warranty. And now let's talk about the HK22 cover stock. That's the base material, and it's got the additive package called NeoFlip 25. Now you remember the original 3D offset that we just re-released had the NeoFlex 25 cover stock on it. This one is the same additive package, it's just got a little more pearl in it to make it the NeoFlip. So, you know, the pearl loading level has changed, but the additive package is the same. And the HK22 is actually the base resin, base material that the additives are going into. So the verbiage is a little confusing, but it's actually quite simple. This is a brand new cover base. It's basically like starting from scratch from ground zero. And they've used the same additive package that they did in the NeoFlex cover stock in this HK base. So it's base plus additives that gives you the total of the chemistry of the cover stock. So they've just used the same additive package in the new base, and it has completely changed the reaction of this ball, and I cannot overstate this. We'll look at it on the hook chart, and I'm sure you can go out and find some videos of the reaction, but this one's never going to be like the most angular ball that you've ever seen, because it doesn't have the intermediate diff to make it like a super sharp, super change of direction. This one is a super hard arcing, hard charging back end motion, like you've probably never seen in the Hammer lineup in this price point. And as if that's not enough for Hammer fans to be excited about, how about another purple ball? The purple urethane reactive. And I mean, this is just building on the legacy of the famous, infamous, however you want to look at it, purple hammer. It is the exact same core shape. You'll notice that the numbers are different. This ball has more flare potential with a total differential of 0.027. That is certainly up from the purple hammer urethane with an 0.15. So that's going to give you more flare potential, more flaring spacing when the ball revs up. And that's because we're not trying to pull any punches here. All we did was we literally took the same core and we swapped the urethane cover for the reactive cover. When you put a reactive cover on it, the reactive material is actually a lighter density and thus a lighter weight. So in order to get the weight back up where it belongs for a 15-pound ball or any weight ball, then you have to boost the density of the inner core in order to get the weight back up. And what that does is it increases the core's contribution to the motion, which gives you a higher total differential. And that's why we end up with 0.27, even though the core shape is exactly the same. And that's true of a two-piece bowling ball when it's only inner core and cover material. If you have a compound like the carbon fiber infused like outer core compound, then you have more variables to play with. You can kind of balance those and get the same differential with different blah, blah, blah. What you're here to know is that this one's going to flare more, it's going to hook more because of the increased differential, and it's going to back end a little more because of the strength of the reactive cover. So all told, this is categorically a stronger ball, both in motion shape and in total hook, really. And so we're not trying to say, oh, this is a reactive urethane or whatever. No, this is truly a reactive ball, and it truly is a step up, a step stronger, and maybe a step sharper, although that's subjective, than the urethane counterpart. So this is going to be a great fit for tournament arsenals to go above the Purple Hammer. If you struggle to use Purple Hammers because you have low rev rate or high speed, this reactive version is perfect. And if you're a two-hander, no-thumber, a high-rev player who finds success on tougher conditions with the Purple Hammer, then this is an option for heavy volumes for you for sure. And we're hoping to win a lot of stops on the regional and national level with the combination of the two purple balls. Could be deadly. Meet the new comparison chart, same as the old comparison chart. I've just updated the look to fill the screen and make it a little more user-friendly. They're sorted, as always, by oil volume from lightest on the left to heaviest on the right, and by response to friction, with the sharpest responding balls toward the top of the chart and the smoothest responding balls toward the bottom of the chart. You'll notice that our two newest releases, 3D Offset Attack and Purple Hammer Reactive, are highlighted in yellow. We're also going to talk about the Envy and the Scorpion Sting, because we have been. We're actually going to start with the Envy. This is our new heavy oil monster. You'll notice that despite the fact that it's built for the heaviest amount of oil volume as any hammer ball, its response is still pretty up there, pretty high on the chart. Normally, as you gravitate right toward the heaviest oil category side of the chart, the balls start to fall lower and lower on the chart with a smoother and smoother response because they're digging early, bleeding energy early, and then rounding out the back of the lane. But we found a way to pair a higher intermediate differential core with a moderate RG to get this ball to read the back of the lane and hook a little more at the back of the lane than most of the ASIMs that you've seen in this high performance category. So this one will shape despite the fact that it's an absolute snow tire. It's aggressively sanded and it's going to be no slouch for high oil volumes. My only recommendation is that you do throw it in oil volumes. If you have a medium oil house shot or a characteristically high friction surface like a wood lane surface or a really old paneled synthetic, then if you're a speed dominant player or a lower rev player, this ball could still be good for you, but the high rev players are gonna wanna find some head oil and find some natural push to use this one. It'll shape at the back of the lane really well. If you put it through a bunch of head oil, it'll start to blend out and even out a little bit, maybe to your disadvantage if you don't feed it enough head oil in the front. Taking a big step down on the chart, we're going to look at the Scorpion Sting. The Scorpion Sting is built to handle a medium to medium light amount of total oil volume. It's fairly centric on the chart. It's a compounded finish, which means it's going to glide through the fronts really easily and give you a hard arcing back end motion. I wouldn't call it a sharp motion because it's still fairly predictable, but it is probably a little longer and a little sharper than a like drilled web pearl, for example. It's not going to handle quite as much oil volume. I don't think it covers quite as many boards as a web pearl because it gets through the fronts and the mid lanes just a little bit easier than that ball before it's making its change of direction. But characteristically, those core shapes are fairly similar, and the cover stock strength is probably a little less on this ball, even though I do think it is a sharper cover stock, despite the fact that it's not as early and diggy. So you'll find that this one slots nicely under the sharper balls like your Black Widow Ghosts, your Offset Attacks, which we'll talk about in a minute, or even your Web Pearls as a nice little step down. And if you're bowling in a high friction center or a center that doesn't put out too much volume, you'll find that this one's actually fairly useful on more medium, shorter house shots as well. it has the right characteristic blendiness off the friction. It's not so sharp that it's uncontrollable. And that's what I really like about the balls like the Webs, like the Scorpions, that have a fairly spherical core and a flip block on top. You really can't go wrong with that motion. It's kind of a bread and butter look for the Hammer line. Now let's talk about the ball on the chart that's screaming, "Look at me." This beautiful vibrant blue is a throwback to the Super Flip, and this 3D offset attack is also highlighted in yellow because it's our newest ball. And you'll notice that it is the sharpest ball currently on the chart. Despite the fact that it's so sharp at the back of the lane, it's not so clean that it doesn't make the move. It's still slotted in the medium to medium heavy volume category, and it's really not much less ball than a Black Widow Ghost. Now the Black Widow Ghost has the added advantage of having about 16 points of intermediate differential that really make it go up off the late mid lane, so that intermediate differential is an advantage over the 008 of the 3D offset attack just in terms of shape at the break point. But what this ball lacks in intermediate differential, it's more than making up for in stick at the back of the lane. Despite the fact that it glides fairly effortlessly for the first half of the lane, it really grabs holds of the late mid lane and gives you a hard charging back-ending motion that is a little bit eye-popping, to be honest with you. I don't have much more I can say about this ball other than it's kind of a stand left, throw right dream, opposite for lefties. But I will say that despite the fact that it's so sharp, I do love the versatility of this ball. And last, but certainly not least, the Purple Hammer Reactive. You'll notice that this fits kind of snugly between the 3D offset attack and the Scorpion in terms of like oil volume or like the type of condition that you would use on it, but the reaction shape is so much different, so much different. Look how low it is on the chart, how smooth this reaction shape is overall, aided in part by its ultra low total differential, but also by the more moderate cover stock that we have on this ball. You'll notice that it's still a step up from the Purple Hammer, and even a step up from the Black Widow Pink Urethane. The thing about this ball is that it's a characteristically different shape with more continuation and more back-end motion than you get out of those two urethane balls. And even though the Pink Widow Urethane is closer to it, the reaction shapes are much different. Here's where our 2D chart's kind of a disadvantage because I can't give you all the nuances of ball motion in just two axes. What I'd like to say is that the Purple Reactive is definitely cleaner than the Pink Widow, and it is just a rounder, more continuous back-end motion, and continuous is the key word, because the Pink Widow Urethane definitely diggy and early in the mid lane, but it tends to straighten out and go forward. Great for trapping your angles, controlling your angles on the tougher medium conditions, but when you want to open up the lane a little bit, that Pink Widow has to go back in the bag. This Purple Reactive is stronger than that ball by a good amount. We've had staff players playing every part of the lane with this ball so far, and I think it's going to be a real hit for league bowlers as well, because it gives you that Purple Hammer option without the carry down and with a little more strength and a little more entry angle, which house patterns require. I'm wholly convinced you could buy these 4 new bowling balls, maybe throw in a Purple Hammer Urethane for good measure, go to any tournament and have a look. That's how versatile and wide-ranging these last 4 product launches have been for Hammer. I mean, think about it. You need more hook? Grab an Envy. You need more angle? Grab a 3D offset attack. You need more control? Grab a Purple Hammer Reactive. You need more length? Grab a Scorpion Sting. They're practically covering all bases on the chart. You can weave whatever motion shape you need into your current or existing arsenal, of course. You don't need to pick up all of them. You can always replace the shapes as you need to. That's the point of arsenal building. And we're doing our best to help you do it. I think these are 4 very versatile releases from Hammer in the last couple months here. And they're available now at your local pro shop. Although the 3D offset attack, if I get my editing done in time, the 3D offset attack and the Purple Hammer Reactive are going to be available November 18th. So assuming I get this video out before then, they'll be available on the 18th, and the other 2 are already available. If you've got your hands on these early, or the other 2 balls have already been released, let me know what you think about them. How do they fit in your arsenal? How are you liking them? How are they replacing the shapes? What do you think about arsenal building? You let me know, because Hammer is one of the most complete brands in bowling. And do not sleep on these HK covers, because the new technology, Hyperkinetic 22, it's in the 3D offset attack, and you're going to see it in more balls in the future in the Hammer brand and in the other brands of Brunswick. It's been a game changer for shiny ball performance for us, and we're very excited about it. So make sure you're paying attention to what balls have that cover stock technology. And since you're here and you're still listening to me ramble, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube and Facebook pages at Bowling Buckosh, where I try to keep up with all the releases by making new informational videos on them as they come out. So until next time, check back often.